Gentlemen, call to order. Want to turn the lights on and off? This is not a call that we smoke. Yeah, we're ready. We're already on. Welcome to part 2 of our review on the Shiur, Parshat Tisa, Tafshin Ayin Vav. Let's briefly get back to where we were. We began with recognizing that we have very mirror image almost Parshiot. If we take Tzaveh with Kitisa, so in one parsha we have essentially the parsha of Aaron HaKohen, all of the, I shouldn't even say Aaron HaKohen, Aaron, in which part of the element of Aaron is that they're introduced to the concept of Kuna, but essentially the Kuna doesn't really come into place, you understand, until here, because we need to have the Ish of Levi. It has to be Aviv, and so on. That's the only way that in Mil'uyat Yedchem becomes here Levi to Aaron, as we pointed out last week. Last week was just Aaron without any Levi yet. Here we have a parsha which is the exact opposite. Aaron, who is there, Keneged Adam Rishon and Ma'aseh, as Rabbi Bachya points out, is the essential spirit of the Ruach HaChayim of the Mishkan. And as we know, that the actual presence of the Mishkan is a function of the Kohen Gadol and all of the Deres, so that the Mishkan HaEdut, which is expressed in their Ma'aravi, which is Edut to the Yisrael, Shashinat Sharav Yisrael, all of that was dependent on the specific Kohen Gadol at the time, so that the Gemara contrasts the years of Shimon HaTzadik and the way that the Ner Ma'aravi wasn't Kova with the other Kohen Gedolim. It's not only that Aaron per se was the initial Ruach that brought the Onan, which was obviously the Ashras Hashchina to the Mishkan Mudorot, but it's constantly a function of the Darg of the Kohen Gadol, which is why it's so important to us Gufa on Yom HaKippurim. Is the Vashem Oila B'Yamin, is Vashem Oila B'Smol, was he Zeicha to be Machar, but the Yom Tov Ha'Ya'isa, and all of these aspects that are still retentions from that incredible presence of what Aaron is in the Mishkan. In this parasha, it's the Egel Hashasa Aaron. It's the Shepra Aleshim Tzadik coming in. It's the Hevet Aleim Chata Agidolah. It's the way the Or HaChaim was learning. We saw that he ends up blaming Klal Yisrael for everything. And that's literally Leshimtza. And he's reduced to whimpering in front of Moshe. No, please don't get angry at me. And it's an entirely different way of looking at things, whereas Moshe Rabbeinu reaches here the moment of his extreme Gedula, which is Le'enei Kol Yisrael, which is the Shviras Haluchos itself, which strikes us as being a tremendous chutzpah initially. We know that a Baruch comes as the Yasher Kochacha Sheshivarta, and that's Le'enei Kol Yisrael, Zu Shviras Haluchos. And the change, of course, is an impact on Klal Yisrael L'Deres, obviously, and on the human species L'Deres. This becomes as great a change as the Chet of Adam Rishon in Gan Eden impacted us in terms of the mortality, the changeover from Charut al-Luchot, which is Altik Charut al-Cherut, into a Luchot of Shvirat al-Luchot, which becomes the Shvira of our lives and the Shvira of our memories and the Shvira of the human species itself, into all of the various nikudot that we've never been able to reconstruct yet. So even though we have Luchot, V'Shivrei Luchot in the Oram, still even as a celebration of the loss of memory and the ultimate possibility of Talmud Chacham, Sheshachachet Limudo, and so on. But that change is a horrific change, and the painful elements of the parsha they retain their pain. even in terms of the relationship of Moshe and Aaron, this is unheard of, the conversations to be going on. Until now, what we were talking about, and all of a sudden we have this very, we've only seen half of it so far. We'll be talking about it later, the other half. So that this is a transition that is so fundamental that in order to get a better grasp of what the meaning of the transition is, and how it is that this is such a revolutionary change, and obviously so being set up from the beginning, whether it's in terms of the Mukta Ma'uchra and the No Ma'aglotea, and all of the inyanim in which the Torah is presenting to us a michlal of the human condition, essentially, because that's what emerges from all of this. It's not simply the question of the problems that we have, which, remember, according to the Rambam, are the underlying realities of the human condition. The problems that we have with Avodat Kochavim are not problems of hate. They're problems with the human condition. They're problems of the nature of evolution. They're problems in the fact that we need to deal with the reptilian, that there's no possible way for us to connect to the world without utilizing these inyanim, which puts everything at risk for us, because in order to be able to properly make ourselves the continuum of what it is to be human, we can't simply ignore any piece. We can't try to just add on things on the top. It means it's a tremendous, tremendous Aveda, and that Aveda is the Aveda of the purification from the Yitzhak of Aveda Zara, and that purification is actually the Binyan HaMishkan, as we saw, the replacement of the Shor on the Merkava with the Kruvim on the Merkava, which becomes the Kruv, B'nei Kruv on the Merkava, which becomes the Kruvim here, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which ultimately leads us to the Yitzhak Avodah Zarah becoming part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and so on. So that means that what we're looking at here is not just a piece of history. We're looking basically at ourselves. We want to be able to understand that. We went into a rather painstaking analysis, and I agree it's painstaking, and I'm sorry if it's taking so much time, but a painstaking analysis of what exactly is going on, because the Parsha presents us with tremendous, tremendous problems of structure. So as we saw, we had the first Parshiyot here seemed to be, first they seemed to be unrelated, and we managed to relate them. The structure is not absolutely clear, in which we go from the idea of the Shkolim to the Asita, which is a Lashon of Truma, which doesn't make sense, where we have the Kano, followed by the Shemen HaMishka, going back to the Ketoret, and then to B'Tzalel. So, okay, we work that out as perhaps, as a first take. That's a continuation of the nature of Kippurim, Kapor, and Achas B'Shana, which, of course, the Kior V'Chano also plays a very important role in terms of the Asara Kiddushin. It introduces the idea of Kapor and Yom Kippurim, which is only achieved after the Mea V'Esrim Yom here in this parsha that go up on Har Sinai. And it may be, therefore, a type of wrap-up in which we find, just like in Vayakov Pekudei, we have the same type of idea, which we go over, once again, all of the Inyanim of the Mishkan. We do the same thing over here with B'Tzalel and move on to the moment at which we can start the actual construction, which brings us back to Har Sinai. The rapidity of the change that brought us back to Har Sinai in the midst of Shabbos was problematic, because there was no indication that all of a sudden a part that may have been actually meant to be placed later, and all of this occurred, according to many Shitas and many Midrashim as well, occurred only after the Mochrat Yom Kippurim. It was part of the Tzivoy of the Mishkan. And here we're clearly 100% back on Har Sinai, because we're talking about the Lech Red and so on. And this is the actual acceptance of those luchot. It was a little disturbing, because if we were talking about something that was innately Mishkan-oriented, I can understand. It doesn't seem on the surface that Shabbos, even though if we're going to darshan, and it is a very disturbing thing, the way that we keep relating to it. As well as in Vayakov Pekudei, we relate to the way in which Zeh Davar that becomes now, instead of telling us about the Mishkan, tells us about Shabbos. I'd excuse that by saying, because you should know it isn't Deicha Shabbos. It's got to be something more than that. And the fact, of course, that all of the Melachos of the Mishkan are the definition of the nature of Shabbos, and the Melachos of Shabbos, and the entire idea of Melachos Machsheves B'chlal, which is the introduction here of B'Tzalel, or the Chochmah, the Bina, the Dat, and the harchov of the concept of Melech and Machshavah, which we saw earlier. We're going to have to see how and why it is that Tzivoy of Shabbos and Yom Kippur here is specifically central to the transition that we have between the original vision that we had of Mishkan before and what comes here as a result of Chet. So that was the first part. And then from there, we moved on to the problems of the organization of the times. It didn't make sense of the times. The first part of Arbaim Yom up on Har Sinai. It was very clear. So this was the end of those Arbaim Yom. The last Arbaim Yom is over here. And we have the Gvulot on Har Sinai. The last ones are also clear. We're very confused about what happened in between and when all of these things happened in between. So we don't even know when there was even time for all of these things to happen in between. Supposedly, we were talking about the Aliyah is talking about after Kabbalah Satire, and we only have 40 days. We have to get Shivas B'Tammuz. Then you've got to be able to go up on the next day in order to be able to get us to Rosh Chodesh Elul to get down on Yom Kippurim from the end of the last 40-day period. So it's not as if we have any play. There's no play in time. If there's no play in time, then we had difficulty with understanding how did all of this happen in the Parsha immediately after the Lech Raid and Moshe Rabbeinu's initial response to the Lech Raid, which was Vayinochem Hashem, but there was still days of Kas and there was tremendous danger for Klal Yisrael. It was the Rekach Eleh B'Kirbecha. So that we weren't quite certain what happens afterwards. And some of the issues that we ran into were there was a Vayimi Mocharat that follows the Yerida after it was Bod Kam Kisotot, then comes on that same day, which seems to be the day of the Yerida, on that same day comes the Shevet Levi going around Ivru Bashar and the killing by Shevet Miluad Yetchem. And then it says Vayimi Mocharat. So then Moshe Rabbeinu says, look, I'm going to go up. So apparently the words that follow Vayashav Moshe Hashem is back up on Har Sinai again. And there was no interruption. As Ramban points out, there was never any time that the Shekhinah was mistaleket from Har Sinai. The entire time the Shekhinah was there. We don't see that there was any change in that. So despite all of the facts that were going on down on the ground with changes in Klal Yisrael, there was no indication that the Shekhinah had moved in terms of Har Sinai.
It wasn't Mustalik until
the very end. Right. Okay, so then, if that's the case, if this is the Arbaim Yom, then we did not understand how in the world, after HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, Lech alei mizeh, how, first of all, it's possible to say that they heard about it. Which way did they hear it? Vayishma Amad Tavar Hazeh, Vayitabalu, how exactly did they hear it? Well, who told them? If Moshe Rabbeinu is still up on Har Sinai, it's supposed to be Arbaim Yom on Har Sinai. And then we got him into a crazier situation, which we were in the middle of discussing, which was how in the world we could have the description of the Moshe Yikach Ta'ov and Atalo B'chutz L'Machana Chikmen L'Machana V'Kra Lo Moed, and then as Rashi says, this whole big long more than 6 months. 6 months, no, 6 months, a little bit less, 10 days less. 6 months, basically, until where all of this goes on. So, this is a description of the ongoing reality. And for some reason, we bring it in over here, even though Moshe appears to be still up on Har Sinai. We don't know when he made it. So according to Rashi, he had to have made it after Yom Kippurim, which, as Ramban explains, what in the world is it doing here? Why do we need to talk about it here, Bichlal? Fine, that's where we were up to. Now, the Ramban's response, therefore, to this is important, even though it sounds like it isn't central to our discussion. We'll see that it gives us entryways into understanding what's happening. So the Ramban's response to this is also a very difficult response because basically he turns the description of Moshe Rabbeinu's Ohel Moed into sort of a mistake, in the sense that he says like this, Eino nachon beinai, what Rashi is saying. Kibatam laskik v'kam be'emtza parasha. Exactly the problem. What is it doing here? It doesn't have any implications for the moment. ודברי רבותינו בכל המדרשים שעשה משה זה בעבור חטא העגל, because מנודה לרב, מנודה לתלמיד. And if according to Rashi, it's אחרי יום הכיפורים, הרי גם הקדוש ברוך הוא וגם משה ברצון היו. That was the questions that we understood. Makes no sense. Right. So he suggests, אבל הנראה כי ביום לידתו ב-17 בתמוז, שרף העגל, דן עובדיו, ויהי ממחרת, אמר להם שיעלה אל השם, לכפר עליה. That much we saw. And he did. ויעלה אל ההר ששם הכבוד, וזהו וישב משה אל השם, והתפלל תפילה קצרה. That's why it's such a brief tefillah, not because it's trying to just give us the outlines of what was that we thought maybe, I mean, it's strange it should be so short. No, it was very short because there wasn't any time. והשם ענה אותו מי אשר חטא לי, אתה לך נחה את העם, החל בהם הנגב, at that moment, ציווה לו then לך עלה מזה אתה והעם, who he gives out to Israel. So fine, he was supposed to go down. He comes down, tells this to Israel. Vayitabalo, vayitnatzlu, Azra Moshe. So what was happening now? Moshe gets the sense that this is not going to be an easy situation. And that in fact, hadavar aroch ma'od, lo yada ma yeh b'sofo. Because he sees that the requirements to get the Shekhinah back online, that they should be on the same page, he sees they're very far apart in the negotiations at this stage. So he's trying to get HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be allergic on them. He sees that he's not getting anywhere very quickly, so he realizes he's got a lot of negotiations ahead of himself. So what can he do? So he decides, because he recognized that otherwise how the Shekhinah going to be medaberet lo? Ki einena shoreh b'kerev ha'am. At this point, it's still because. So obviously, it'll be like trying to speak to the Shekhinah in the middle of Mitzrayim. B'tzetom in a year, so he has to be b'tzetom in a machaneh. V'im yeh ohel b'kerev ha'machaneh, lo yeh lo adibur. Fine. So therefore, he said, "V'haya kol mevakesh Hashem," meaning not that he said to do this, but he's thinking. These are the thoughts of Moshe. So Moshe says, "Okay, I'm taking my opening of the time. And what's my purpose in this? Yeah, kol mevakesh Hashem, let's say it, so on and so forth." And then we switch. V'akatuv yashlim l'saper. What actually did happen? Now, what actually did happen with this oil? כל מה שהיה בעוד האוהל שם עד שהוקם המשכן ויום ביום הכיפורים עד אחד בניסן על דעת רבותינו, but it didn't really become functional because in the end Moshe decides he's got such a lot of negotiations, he goes back up again, even though it doesn't talk about that. So we have there Abar Boim Yom in the middle. That must be the pshat. And therefore he really was miyased, the Otsaat oil, on that day, ready to come back down. And it was like a brief interval, so it's all considered to be. Now, Vira'iti, he says. Vira'iti, the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Arba'im Yom Asa Moshe Bahar. This is the first Arba'im Yom. Koreh Bedat Mikra Bayom, Shoneh Bedat Mishnah Balayla, Ula'achar Arba'im Yom, Lakachat Haluchot, Vayredet Al HaMachaneh B'Shivasar B'Tamuz, Shavar Haluchot, Haraget Chotei Yisrael, and here's the big surprise, the Asa Arba'im Yom B'Machaneh. Ad Shesaraf et ha'egel v'kiteto ke'afar ha'aretz yichrit avadam Yisrael. And that's the strangest thing. V'hitkin kol shevet b'mekomo. What is that? I mean, that this only happens in the Machaneh after the Asiyat HaMishkan and the binyan of the Machaneh, right? Okay? ובראש חודש אלול אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא עלה עלי ההרה. So it was only the first days and the last days. והעבירו שופר במחנה, שמשה עלה להר, שלא יטעו עוד אחרי עבודה זרה. הקדוש ברוך הוא נתעלה באותו שופר, עלה אלוהים בתרועה, וכן התקינו החכמים שתוקע בשופר בראש חודש אלול בכל שנה ושנה, עד כאן. So it's the Rambam. V'im came, so lefi the Tanit Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer, Moshe Kachat Ha'or V'chol HaParasha actually happened. Mi Yudchet B'Tammuz, after Moshe came down that first day, gone up, said the Brit Tefillah, come down, but never went up again. So therefore, I no longer have my problem. If this is true, says Rambam. So I no longer have my problem, because then it's not describing what Moshe was thinking, it's describing what actually happened. It didn't only happen now, perhaps. It continued happening after, from Yom Kippurim until Echad B'Nisan, which is still strange, because then he's not addressing the question of, so why did he continue it there if the only reason that it was there was because he wasn't going to be getting the Ashras HaShekhinah if it was in the Machaya? And now he himself has that, but he doesn't address it. So Im Ken Yeh, Moshe Kachat Ha'or V'chol HaParasha, Miyudchet B'Tammuz Ad Sof 40, Miyom HaKippurim Ad Echad B'Nisan. It sort of has the worst of both worlds. Aval Lo Yavo Zeh Kehogya. Why? Because, I mean, it's not like it's just a medrash that there were 3 times Arbaim Yom. It's the psukim in Dvarim that not Lifnei Hashem Karishon Arbaim Yom, Arbaim Laila, Lechem Lo Achalti, Mayim Lo Shatiti, Achar Kach Katuv Od Hapa, ואת נפל לפני השם את 40 היום ואת 40 הלילה אשר התנפלתי, כי אמר השם להשמיד אתכם, ואי אפשר שיהיה כל זה ב40 יום האחרונים, אחר שנאמר לו פסל לך ועלה עלי ההרה, כי אז היו ברצון. Obviously, that's telling you psal לך, so what is that? אמר השם להשמיד אתכם. So when was this אמר השם להשמיד אתכם? So there needed to be, obviously, each reference to Lechem Lo Achalti, Mayim Lo Shatiti is a different aliyah. So if that's the case, there needed to be a middle time. And according to this, there is no middle time. Ukvar bitel hashmid etchem. Okay. So we're left with that structural problem in terms of the way that the Torah is put. Obviously, all of this has got to be central to our understanding the nature of the transition. I mean, basically, the description here is of a transition, right? Arbaim Yom is profoundly a transition. It's not simply negotiating pattern. It's things are changing. There's no bigger contrast to Luchos Rishonim and Luchos Achronim. That means that the segues, essentially, those are Arbaim Yom, and those are Arbaim Yom. But Dafka, the thing that we're looking for, to understand the nature of the transition, it's been Dafka, the thing that is just completely confusing. And the Rishonim don't know, and the Midrashim seem to be confused. I mean, the Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer is not going to lead to the Gemara and so on. But I mean, it's an unbelievable situation. So the very information that we need is the information that is disappearing here for us. So this is problematic, you know. And then we get on to our next couple of little parshiot that come before Psalach Hashnei Luchot Avanim Kirishonim. So what were those 2 parshiot? It's Moshe's response to HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying that, okay, Lecha lemi ze ata va'am v'shalach lifanecha malach. So the Am, of course, is very upset about this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has said that come along with them and that it's dangerous if it comes along and so on. Right? We understand that the tachlit of the entire story is the creation here of the concept of a Mishkan in which the Shekhinah will be shored b'tochenu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Lo aleh v'kirecha, and there'll only be a malach. That's the end of the concept of the Mishkan. So not only is the idea that interrelates the Yitzhak Avodah Zarah and the substitution of Mishkan for Avodah Zarah and so on, the issue that's taking place here, but the very question of whether there can be such a thing as a Mishkan at all is the fundamental problem. And now that is what Moshe Rabbeinu has to deal with, and that's the crucial segue, really. We don't know when it's taking place, but we know what he says. So he says, Re'eh, which is very, I mean, this is Re'eh, look. I mean, if you think about it, the changes, the profundity of the changes are expressed. אתה מתייאש כבר? אתה מתייאש? לא.
הוא רק הגיע, מה הם מתייאש?
לא, כי זה באנגלית.
אבל מבינים, זה קודש, מבינים בכל שפה.
זה נכון. כן, כי דברים היוצאים מן הלב נכנסים מן הלב. לא צריך שפה בכלל.
בכלל לא צריך, רק מנגינות.
Just chronologically, it turns out.
So he said it's a word from our sponsor.
No, word from a sponsor is the empty envelope down there waiting for you.
No, it doesn't seem that this is where Rabban and Rashi are coming from. It works out time-wise. That it goes together with Rashi's understanding of the Mishkan was only a response to the ego. So the oil that Moshe Rabbeinu makes is only after Yom Kippur, when Hashem says make a Mishkan. But the Ramban understood that the Mishkan was meant to be already right away. So Moshe Rabbeinu is already making the oil even before.
Right, but that doesn't change the fact that we still have to worry about the ability for there to be a continued belechtacha.
Just
Which is
time
not for the Mishkan. Yeah, time-wise it makes sense. Fine. So now we need to look at those two parshas. So first, as I was saying, the re'eh here is an indication of the nature of the changes, because each step is accompanied by some type of re'iyah, which is a re'iyah of change, a perception of change. So in other words, it starts with the re'ehs. Starts with the simple idea.
Behold, like a sense of behold.
Here it's coupled with a very profound sense of behold. But the other re'ehs, in other words, the vayar mara'ah. Right? Okay, so we have the explanation. He makes the whole. I mean, it just says vayar Aaron in the middle of nowhere. He's in the middle of a conversation, basically. What's in vayar Aaron? So there's an indication of now I grasp what we're up against. In which case, the re'eh is also an indication of, look, we've got a serious problem. This is the vayar. The same thing happens with Moshe, because then Moshe is listening to what Aaron is telling him. Vayar Moshe ta'am kippur. I see something. I don't know. You guys maybe don't understand it. Yoshua doesn't understand. You don't understand. I know what's going on over here. So that's the further vayar. And I mean, even the yar that begins it, the vayar am kippur shesh Moshe, may be, as we'll see later, an indication of some development that needs to be understood. That ties us into the change of re'eh ata omer elai. Fine. So that itself is interesting. So when he says, and this is obviously a problem, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu just said, right? So what do you mean, ata lo hoda'ata? So Rashi has a horrific pshat, in which Rashi says, ata lo hoda'atani, and don't try to tell me that you told me already, because I refuse to even acknowledge that. It's awful. It's very tough negotiating tactics when you're not exactly the one that's holding the cards, you know. I said, Rabban says they, you know, like that. How would he talk like that? Okay. You know, it's like, that doesn't even count. Make another offer. It's amazing. It's always amazing. Okay. That's only half of the problem with Rashi, because after HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, fine. So then Moshe Rabbeinu's response to that is, Vayomer elav, Imein panecha ochim al ta'alenu mizeh. I just said I'm coming. So Rashi says, basically Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, it's a good thing you said that, because man, if you hadn't said that, let me tell you, that's absolutely nuts. I mean, nobody would do that in negotiations. The guy just gave in. So, you know, make it sound like it was a big thing, you know, just a good thing. So what could this mean? You get an amazing understanding of what's happening according to Rashi. So, furthermore, Tainas the Rambam, the way that Rashi's understanding the v'atayim na matzati chen beinecha, or the eni na adrachecha, is coming in the middle of this negotiations. And I'm waiting for you to tell me. And by the way, while I'm waiting for you to tell me, I'd like to have things much better than they were before. I would really like to be able to and so on. I understand what? No. So now we want to be Marviach from the ego. I don't get it. Like, and not to mention the fact that according to Rashi, does it make sense that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said earlier, "Hinei anochi sholeach lefnechem malach, kam nitbasru she'atidim lachto," according to Rashi, right? Did Moshe say anything? No. Why didn't he say right then and there, no, we don't want to hear about that. I mean, to say it over here where everything is really in bad shape is much worse than to say initially, while things are still good, look, that's not going to work. Let's figure out some alternative in case of hate. Not after you already hate, they just start fighting. I mean, that's really weird, and which is another time in the Ramban. Well, I understand what you mean. How could you say that? How could you be marviach more than you had before in the middle of your negotiations? All right. Somehow or other, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives in to him and says, after all, it's a good thing you said that, because look, it would have been terrible. I mean, that's what you say before. Now we say afterwards. It's such a strange negotiation to say it's a good thing you said that, because I'll tell you what I was going to say. If you didn't say it, say it. Don't what you were going to say. Unbelievable, right? Because of that, the Ramban has a totally different approach, obviously, to this entire discussion. And what he understands is, this is a continuation of our that we had earlier between the Ramban and Rashi about what was the meaning of Malach. So the whole idea of Al Tamer Bo Kishmi B'Kirbo, which Rashi understands as being the Malach, which appears later to Yoshua, Atabati, because when I came to Moshe Rabcha, he didn't want me. Ramban says it's absolutely not true. The Malach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was referring to then was nothing to do with hate. That Malach was the Malach HaBrit, HaMalach HaGoel Ki Mikorah. That was the Malach that was with the Avot, and that basically becomes the Makor of Hashrat HaShekhinah B'Yisrael, and that's the reference to the Sar HaOlam and so on. That was Chanoch and all of those in Yonim. That's fine. Adarabah, that relates directly to Namatzati Chen Beinecha, because that's that Hanhaga. What happened with Yoshua was this Malach. That he says, Ani Sar Tzva Hashem Atabati, which was supposed to be the Malach that would bring them into Eretz Yisrael, not a Malach that was going to be able to be Mashra Shekhinah. That was the Malach that Moshe was docha. And therefore, when Moshe says here, means exactly that. You say that I'm going to be sending a malach, right? But you didn't say which malach. Now I know that you're trying to sneak in this malach Sartzva Hashem. That's no good. So then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, fine. So then, if that's the case, we'll have Ashras HaShekhinah. To which Moshe Rabbeinu replies, that's not enough. Now it's not enough. So the Lashon Ramban is, look, you promised basically on Nivel Malach. That was part of the deal of the Heveiti Etchem. The Heveiti Etchem is part of the Yitzhak. And you said specifically, Anochi. Understand? How can you get away with sending a malach? Which is very strange, because, I mean, that means that according to Ramban, also Moshe is upping the ante. These are the kind of negotiating tactics that he was using with Paro, As soon as Paro gives in, no, now we need more. Every time. So he's also doing the same thing. But in any event, מה?
הוא יהודי.
נכון. שהוא עבד בשוק, גם אולי. שוק הכרמל. So in any event, he's asking for more. So he wants something that wasn't there before. And that's obvious because no matter how you learn, the Niflino ani ve'amcha mikol ha'am asher al pnei ha'adama, as the Gemara says, is essentially the end of the story of Hashrat Hashchina Eitzel Umot Ha'olam, right? So the bakasha that Moshe Rabbeinu was mevakesh was Shalot Tishra Shchina al Ovdei Avodat Kochavim. This is so important that in the closing pasuk of the Torah, Einei Kol Yisrael, it stresses V'lo kam navi k'Moshe, V'lo kam navi b'Yisrael k'Moshe, which goes directly back to Bilam and to the fact that Bilam needs to be taken out over here, which as we pointed out, that's the Rega Echad Elevi Kirbecha, Lo Haya Baki Rega Chutz Bilam, which means that in getting rid of this Rega Echad Elevi Kirbecha V'chiliticha, the Bakasha, that there should not be a Shechina that is Shira in that fashion of Mikra, which becomes the Aleph Zeira in Vayikra to be Machalik between Bilam and Moshe, which becomes in this Parsha, says the Medrash, the source of the Karnei Hod of Moshe Rabbeinu. Because when he wrote Vayikra, the Sefer Torah, the Aleph that was there in order to be Machalik between Vayikra and Vayikra was an Aleph Zeira. So there was a little bit of ink left on the Kumos because everything was Malachas Marshavas. That little bit of ink he wiped on his forehead, which became the Karnei Hod. But of course, that ties it directly into this Bakasha here, right? All right, fine. So every last piece ties into this. But I mean, that means that we are trying to get better. Fine.
Shechina equated with prophecy? Is that how we're going to say Shechina?
Yeah, that's what Rashi says. Shalot Tishra Shechina means that there shouldn't be any communication. Hashras Shechina opens up the door to, yeah. I mean, the Midas is a symptom. The way we need to be machalik is it should be clear to everybody that symptom. There's that difference. Okay, and then we have the other interim parsha in which Moshe Rabbeinu asks for the basically for the Yud Gimel Midas, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him in the end. He asks for Harini at Kodecha. So he wants to have now a deeper connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than before, which the Rambam explains all of these issues. And we have for the first time Ani Avir Kol Tuvi Al Panecha, which again, as the Rambam explains in Mar Nevuchim, the Ani Avir Kol Tuvi Al Panecha is a change in the status of Moshe Rabbeinu's Hasaga, so that Vayachulo Hashamayim Ba'aretz V'chol Tzva'am, which is the expression of Kol Tuvi, since it says Vayah Hashem et Kol Asher Asa V'nei Tov Ma'od, means that Moshe Rabbeinu at that, wait a second, that sounds a lot like Shabbos. So the Moshe Rabbeinu at this moment was mischaber to the instant of Vayachulu, such that all of any possible outcome of any interaction or interrelationship of the elements of Bria that might be possible, which becomes in the end Shivim Ponim Latera and Memtes Ponim Latuma and Memtes Ponim Latera and so on and so forth, are all given to Moshe, which he didn't have before. So there is an Aliyah. Okay.
Also connects to the Mizrah Sheni Mashabas, which is about Moshe Rabbeinu's question will be about Tzchak Rishayim and Shpach being mated to Rishayim and being married to Tzaddikim.
Okay, it's a little bit ponderous, but yeah, except I mean, try to stick to the ones that just sort of okay, good.
And also that comes out of the Vaychulu.
Yeah, of course. Sure. Okay, and then we get up to the Psolacha. Okay, so the Psolacha now involves us in the answer to the previous one, and all of this, that's the Yud Gimel Midas, and you don't need the Zechor L'Avram Yitzchak Yaakov anymore, and then we have a reconstruction of the Brit, getting all the way down to the crazy which is obviously clearly part of the Brit package we're recreating. Again, each of those three times is the three times that we recreate the Brit. So we have exactly the same things in the Bod and Petach Hamor and so on and so forth that we had earlier. And now somehow he's directly back on our Sinai, and then we have this tremendous switch to Teresh Shabbat at the end. So it's the K'tav L'chat HaDvarim Ha'ela, Ki Al Pi HaDvarim Ha'ela, Karati T'cha Brit Vet Yisrael, and here is Vayishamim Hashem Arba'im Yom Arba'im Layla Lechem L'Rachal Mayim Lo Shata. This is the last Luchot, the last 40 days. Vayibered it Moshe Me'ar Sinai, Shnei Luchot Ha'idlut Yad Moshe, B'rito Min Ha'ar. Notice, by the way, the constant repetition of the word Moshe. It never says he, it always says Moshe. So Beredet Moshe Me'ar Sinai, Yad Moshe, B'rito Moshe Lo Yada, Vayaron Ve'aron V'Resat Moshe, and so on. Vayikra Aleim Moshe, Vayidaber Moshe Aleim. This is in one pasuk, which is the closing pasuk, V'ra'u b'nei Yisrael et pnei Moshe, Kikaran or pnei Moshe, Ve'yishiv Moshe et ha'matzra panav ad ba'ol ledaber ito. In one pasuk, three different mentions, which becomes important in the Medrash and the Rabbeinu Bachya, which we'll get to. So again, the middle piece, we're confused. So let's take a look at some of the, we've spoken only about the Seder HaDvarim. Speak first, before we get to trying to integrate it, into some of the conceptual questions. One of the questions that we had is why indeed do we need the interference of Moshe here? Why wasn't it part of the standard Hanag of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The other question is, when was the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu that the words Ko Amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael Simu Ish Karbo Al Yirecho? So Rashi says that is based on Zoveach Elohim Yechoram Viltila Hashem Levado. So it's absolutely correct to say Ko Amar Hashem. These are the words in the Torah. But as I mentioned earlier, we have a big machlokas about what the actual chiyuv of Mita was at that time, right? We found three separate chiyuvim. One of them was the chiyuv that we had. I'll have to use this. I don't even know where my notes are. So the Gemara, I do it right. I set the God of it, Oh, yeah, it's right in front of my eyes. It knows better than me. So the Gemara Yuma says that there's really two different shitas. There's Rav and Levi. So Chad Amar, if he was Zoveah or Koter, B'Sayif. If he was Megafev or Minashek, so then it was B'Mita, meaning Vayikov Hashem. If it was only Samach B'Libo, then it was Badrokan like the Isha Sotah. V'Chad Amar, Edim V'Hatra'ah B'Sayif, and that was the Shevet Levi. And Edim B'Lo Hatra'ah B'Mita, that was B'Mita B'Dei Shammai, which was a Vayigov. And Lo Edim B'Lo Hatra'ah was B'Hadrokan, which ties into the sheet of Sota in terms of what the din is, L'gabi Eid and so on for Brazil. Now, so if you learn like the Chad Omar, that the Misa that's referred to over here is B'Sayif, and the reason it was B'Sayif, as the Rishonim explained, is because it was a rabbin, so they gave it a din of an Ir Nidachat. In Ir Nidachat, we have, instead of normal Misa for a Devet, it's B'Sayif. Fine. So then it would mean that there was an actual kiyum of the pasuk, so Ve'ach Elohim Yechoram. But if you learn that, no, it was just that they went around killing people, so it was extrajudicial, it was just that anybody that they knew that they were aiding Vasra, they didn't bring him to din. That's as the Rishonim explained. So then it would be B'Sayif, literally B'Sayif. But then, obviously, you can't say what Rashi says, that it's a kiyum of Zavech Elohim Yechoram, because it's not a kiyum of Zavech Elohim Yechoram, which is only to be bringing him to Bezdin. So where was there a mitzvah to actually, where he could say, Ko Amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael? And the amazing response to this in the Medrash. It's quite astounding. In which Eliyahu says like this. The time is Eliyahu. So Eliyahu says like this. ויפול מן העם 3,000 איש, מעי אני עלי שמיים וארץ, שלא אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא למשה לעמוד בשער המחנה ולומר מילה שם אליי ולשום איש חרבו. Never happened. להרוג איש את אחיו, רעהו, קרובו, והוא אמר כה אמר שם כישראל. אלא שהיה משה דן בעצמו, ואמר בליבו, אם אני אומר לישראל, יהרגו איש את אחיו, אז יהיו ישראל דנים ויאמרו לי, לא כך לימדנו רבנו סנהדרין שהרגו נפש אחד בישראל, פעם אחת בשבוע, דקרא בחקלנית, ומה אתה הורג 3,000 ביום אחד. לפיכך תלה בכבודו של מעלה, וכל אמר השם אלוקי ישראל, נו, מה כיוון שאמר בשם הקדוש ברוך הוא, מיד ויעשו בני לוי כדבר השם. That's pretty hot stuff.
מי אמר את זה פה?
ירמיהו הנביא אמר את זה. האמת היא שהוא עשה אותו דבר. כן? גם הוא פסק. הקדוש ברוך הוא אמר לו להקריב קורבנות מחוץ לבית המקדש. אז זאת ההלכה. והגמרא אומרת, אתה רוצה שאנשים ישמעו אליך, אז תלה את הדברים באשלי רב אבי, אין לך חברים חזקים, חברים חדשים, פעם מישהו אמר בשם השם, זה היה חברים באמת חזקים, היום צריכים להגיד את זה בשם איזה מישהו גאון או משהו, פעם הקדוש ברוך הוא אמר את זה. בסדר. I mean, it's amazing. Okay, so fine. That's a fascinating answer. So he was lying. Because Eliyahu and the Haftarah goes through basically the same situation, the same place, right? And again, I think the biggest problem is that in this villainous Aaron Parsha, in which Moshe takes the strong arm tactics that he takes, both with Aaron and Kavayochel, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the reality is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu blames him, not Aaron. And it's almost as if, well, now that since I'm sort of blaming, I better move it over to Aaron. Because, I mean, the entire idea, and you look up to it was said to him in that way. Which, of course, is a reference to the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav, somebody's talking to Yisrael, so the Erev Rav is speaking to Yisrael. Who was the one that actually created the Egel? Micha, with the Tas. Who was Micha? The one that Moshe Rabbeinu insisted on taking out, that was Nitmach Meir Binyan, that he was the one that said, Atzelo Itzalta Tamecha. Moshe says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, these are no good. No, don't worry, we can make it work. Okay, fine, take one out and see. The same thing happened with the Erev Rav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, what are you bringing in these garbage for? No, they're nice people. They want to be Gerim. Everything will be fine. I'll take them in. So now HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming back and attacking Moshe. And the Tas was the Tas that Moshe Rabbeinu himself had written, which was the Alei Shor, which now somehow or other obviously is Mechuber to Micha, which was all his fault anyway. And it becomes his grandson that sits there and works for Besel Micha. So you're darn right it was his son, which goes all the way back to Vayom Moshe Hashem et Aish, going back to the beginning of Parshas Yisrael. This is like a major thing that's been all along, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is throwing it in Moshe's face and telling him, get out of here, and it's all your people, and it's all your fault. And Moshe's coming back as if he's on top of the world, and, it's Aaron's fault, and I'm going to fix everything up, and I'm going to be the one that's going to make things work, and then I'll be mevakesh, and I'll be metaken, and the Gamal Aaroni palalti beitai, and Gamal Aaroni taref Hashem od, but Gamal Aaron.
Kind of left Aaron to deal with it.
Exactly. Not only that, that's exactly the point. The point Rav Ovadia is making is what Aaron tries to say to him, but it doesn't quite have the guts to throw it in his face. But he says to Moshe, look, The people said to me, they came to me and they said, "Ki ze Moshe, ish lo yadanu ma el yavo." So Asher Ha'alanu, who would say ze Moshe Asher Ha'alanu, if not the Arab Rab? So obviously these are the guys that it's all your fault. I mean, he was in a very tough situation, so he said it that way. Now, of course, there's an even deeper nakuda that he says, which is, if you had done your job correctly, why, when you go away to the sky for a couple of days, does everything fall apart? I mean, any CEO of a company who can't plan for his own, obsolescence is not a very good CEO, no? And in fact, HaKadosh Baruch Hu really tells Moshe Rabbeinu, listen, we can replace you. That's the whole story over here. This is Yoshua ben Nun the Misharei. Okay? Yeah, okay, that's old stuff. Yeah, he did. Navol Tibon is part of it. There really was Navol Tibon. So, I mean, what's going on? That Moshe Rabbeinu over here has been taken in this way when it seems to have been his fault from the beginning. And I think that the truth is that the change, one take a look at the change really begins. We're mimayed in the Chashivas. The Gemara goes through each piece of what happened here and compares it to specific dinim in terms of the Seita. It's not just that he was considering to be Baitkam Gesaitas. It analyzes every word of the pasuk. So the Yerida of the Mayim, that's Keneged this in the pasuk, and then what it is that the Kohen says is Keneged this. The Parsha says it's not a small issue. We look at it like it's a cute medrash. Baitkam Gesaitas, Pora Esreisha Yishan, Pora Arei Mashim. It's not a small issue. As a matter of fact, the entire question that the Ramban asks about is exactly true because of Satan. You can ask that same kasha on every Satan. Right? It's exactly what Chana says. Look, I'm giving you an opportunity to give your kid the right way. You don't do it the right way, I'll twist your arm. That's all. And I'll go and I'll become a sotah, and then you promised, well, what's going on over here? And this again, as we pointed out, is a pattern. With David HaMelech is Kareshitim, more fertility. It's better for the farming, better for Peirot. Isha zocha to banim, afar ve'efer. K'Avram Avinu, shamar loki afar ve'efer. Well, because she's va'ad ki satit. Ad ki satit, as Rishonim explain, does not mean ad ki satit. You slept with the guy. Ad ki satit means look how you acted. That's so it was inappropriate the way you acted. The ego is at least inappropriate. So all of the ones that survived that shtiyah, everybody drinks. All the ones that survive that shtiyah are the women who survived the sotah, the Meis Sotah, and now their madrega goes up. But the reason that the madrega goes up is because of a reconstruction of the nature of the shorashim of the relationship, correct? I mean, that's obvious. It doesn't go up because, all right, you managed to get by the skin of your teeth. It goes up because now it means that the very fact that she was a sotah and nonetheless had the understanding of the difference between shmirat brit and having fun, that's the difference. So it is ad ki satit. So in other words, the chibur to underlying realities, to the afar hamishkan, so to speak, to the ma'ala ma'al ba'ashem, the ish shel ma'ala, that is between them, the yud and the hey that describes the nature of their relationship, that they could, the fact that it stands keneged her attraction to this guy is a bigger understanding of the shirish of the relationship. And this is a phenomenon that is so common that there are movies about it, literally. That people discover the reality of a relationship only at the point where they're about to destroy the relationship, specifically because they want a connection to somebody else, right? It's not a strange thing at all. So the idea that the Ramban asks, you're gonna be marviach, of course you're gonna be marviach. In the same way that he himself also says, so if we are looking for a change, that change is going to take place in this sense. It's going to take place in exactly the same way that the change would have taken place in a human relationship in the event that a woman drinks sotah. So it's not just he was mechaven lebodka to catch the people that did the ego. It was to catch the people that didn't do the ego as well. Yes, Rebbe.
Sota is not forced to drink. Moshe forced the people to drink.
Good kasha, because it's already too late. Once we're meichad Hashem, it's too late. Then we force you to drink. That's part of the Mishnah, right? That's exactly what Gemara has that. Right? First you say you don't, then you say that you exactly open up their mouth and pour it in. And once we're already meichad Hashem, yeah, you were meichad Hashem with the ego, no? So now we're just taking that and we're forcing you to drink. Very nice point.
It's 22 hours.
Oh, yeah. Why do you need to remind me? So, I think we need to look at that transitional parsha that we didn't understand. Why the Kechamotol Daberito comes as a segue between Shabbos and between the Maaseh Egel itself, because what that shows is that is the interrelationship. Right? It's not stam that it happened to be that this is the moment of the Luchot that connects us to what's going on. That somehow or other that Kechaloto, which Chazal says, that Kechaloto means Im Yodea Adam Shemarak B'Pihim Shemayim Kechala Zohar Chaviva Ha'ava. So then Kechaloto Medaber. And if not, don't talk. Nobody's asking you to give a shir, even if they are. Nobody's asking you to speak to Beit, even if they are. Because it's like the Gemara. You're in the sea, this guy doesn't want to learn. Get out of here. Okay. So they know you made enough. This is well. The sense of absolute love. This is and then we move on to the ego. That means that directly related for after is the way in which this comes out. That means that Moshe specific connection to the Shabbos. That was the word for the Chalot. And the question specifically means that Moshe Rabbeinu's connection, which is very strange. Didn't go very far. So that means that the tefillah itself is literally taking this moment, showing us that the chibur, the measure of it, specifically was kechalotul daberito shnei luchot avanim. We read that together. It happens to be, and it doesn't happen to be. The only connection that we have directly to the shnei luchot avanim arid biyado v'chatu b'hem shmirat Shabbat is exactly this parasha. And only that Nekudah of the Shnei Luchot Avanim, which remains now with us as Matnat Chalko of Moshe. Now that means that the change that is triggered, it's amazing how we read these things,
It's not referring to the second Luchot?
What's that?
It's not referring to the second
No.
Shomer is what the second is. Chosov and Shmiras Shabbos.
But the Madrega of Moshe with Shabbos is not a reference to the second Luchot. It's the Madrega of Moshe, right? This is Amira Nar Sinai. V'chatu b'hem, l'kach b'yado. Shnei luchot avanim l'kach b'yado is said here, it's not said over there.
Right. So how's it follow the Chosov and Shmiras Shabbos?
I mean, that's already like the Gemara says, go tell me what the nusach was. Right? It's not so partial that the two, I mean, unless you learned it, they literally didn't know Chumash. Obviously, it means that it's not clear whether one is an expression of what was written in the other one and so on. But l'chora, I mean, could be, we'll look and see, maybe. But I mean, the fact is, this is the parsha of the Madrega of Moshe. And this is the parsha which that Indian of Shabbos becomes the Iker later on. There's nothing to do with the Madrega of Moshe. It wasn't the Matana of Moshe. Here's where it says exactly the Lashon of Matana, right? Here's where we learn. Yeah, but it sounds like, because we're used to thinking that, but here's where it says, Ladat ki ani Hashem b'kadishchem. Anote batana l'chaverot tzorach l'dio. That's where we learn it from here. That the tefillah should be based on matnat chalko, and it shouldn't be goof at the place where the Gemara learns out that Shabbos is a matana tova yeshli b'beit knesset, which is right over here, right? Ladat ki ani Hashem b'kadishchem. Very difficult to believe that we split it up like that. I don't know, maybe, but my guts tell me that's not, it's not, we'll look afterwards. Could be right. Okay, so that means that somehow or other, what happened over here is that the creation, and here's my suggestion, the creation of these middle days, according to the Pirkei Eliezer, was, and this would be the answer to the Rambam, the Aliyah Har Sinai, coming back down and creating the Oil Moed, was considered to be the Arba'im Yom, the Entzayim, because he never came down. In other words, the idea that it's possible to be Mashra the Shechina in an Oil Moed, and here's the difference. The Shechina only speaks in the Beis HaMikdash, and that's the name of Moshe Mizramis. Moshe stands for Mibein Shnei HaKeruvim. Moshe. But that means that his etzem self was able to take what before was the efforts, or described as the efforts of all of Klal Yisrael, which would allow for the Onan to appear, be Beit Shnei HaKruvim. Over here, there's no intermediaries, there's no kalim, there's no anything. This is my bedroom. I walk into my house. Ashrei ben Enosh, everybody says. They look at Moshe, the Bishtachave, the Shekhinah is there. How did all that happen? Because this was the Shekhinah that was on Har Sinai. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to him, he goes up that second time. He did go up, but he never came down. Because this Yerida was not considered to be a Yerida. There's even a discussion in the Medrash. So what happened? Did the Shekhinah actually come all the way down, or was it still a mile mi'asora? The same questions that we had on Har Sinai. The Me'olam lo yada Shekhinah is speaking about over here in terms of the Olamite of Moshe. What's that doing here? Because in the same way that the Rambam explains that the union of the Mishkan is an attempt to create Oto HaKavod Shaya B'Har Sinai. So that Oto HaKavod Shaya B'Har Sinai accompanies it. The amazing indication of the new Darga that is reached is that in the second Aliyah, it says over here, V'ish lo ya'aleimach gam hatzon v'habakar al yir'u el mula harahu. The Ramban points out the most amazing thing. What is this supposed to mean? The gam hatzon v'habakar al yir'u. He says an unbelievable thing. וגם איש אל ירא בכל ההר, גם בתחתית ההר, מקום מעמד ישראל בראשונה, גם הצאן והבקר לא יראו. כי בראשונות לא הוזהרו, רק לא תיגע בו יד, עם בהמה עם איש. והנה עדיין היו עומדים באזהרה ההיא. Nothing has changed. כי הכבוד היה תמיד בהר, עד שניתנו הלוחות האחרונות. אבל אתה החמיר בשעת מתן הלוחות האלו יותר ממעמד הראשון. והטעם בכל זה. Why was it more machmir? So the way we're learning, it makes a great deal of sense. Why was it so machmir? This is machmir because Lamaisa, even Tachtit Har was not shayach to the expression of the Shekhinah. The Ramban explains the most amazing thing. K'birishonaot haya hama'amad ba'avur kol Yisrael. זה למשה בלבד, בזכותו ובתפילתו, וגדול יהיה הכבוד הנגלה על ההר האחרון מן הראשון. Whoa. That would be the perfect response to the Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer. And of course it's Gadol. Now this ties into a completely different issue as well, which is that there's a beautiful discussion about Semes.
What does it mean that it's going to be bigger for Moshe but not Hashem?
The Ramban is taking for granted that what was talking about for Kol Yisrael had to find a common denominator. And what is for Moshe alone, B'schuto v'tfilato, is much more powerful. So what the Mishkan was with Aaron, and we were thinking, by God, that's the ultimate. This is what a person can be, that it's possible to grow into. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, even any one of them can build a Mishkan. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't need to build Mishkanos. And therefore, the Ashras HaShechina, he takes his bedroom and he calls, this is the Almighty. But we just spent a whole year talking about it. That's for you. For me, I just move my bedroom over here, and then that's the Almighty. Otherwise, what is it by equal Almighty? Well, that's crazy thing. Why be curry Almighty? Come to Vakish Hashem, it's Almighty. Just say, come to Miami. You have to make a big deal of it. That's the point that he's making. That he is shaykh to be curry Almighty. So this is what the Sfas Emes asks. He brings. He says, Achet Shabtotai Tishmoro is a very cute, beautiful word. Achet Shabtotai Tishmoro, says Rashi, is Ma'et Mimelechet HaMishkan. V'Aramban Tamar Zeh. Why? Because always Ach means the thing that you mentioned is supposed to be Memu'at, not the other thing, right? So you say Achet Shabtotai should be less Shmirat Shabbat, not more Shmirat Shabbat. It's a beautiful question. So he brings Adoni Avi Mori V'Rabbi Zecher Tzadik Livracha Amar. That Af Shegam HaMishkan הוא עניין השראת השכינה, וגם עניין שבת, היא עליית כל הנבראים. ממעט הכתוב שאין עניין המשכן בשבת. דבריו צריכים ביור. What is that supposed to mean? Fine. So he ends up explaining like this, that the Malacha, this is L'chora, the question is, why indeed should Shabbat, we should Mishkan not be Docha Shabbat? Both of them are essentially the same Nekudah, right? Everybody says, Mishkan is Kedusha B'zman, Shabbat B'makom, and Shabbat is Kedusha B'zman. So it's why Davke? One you can't be Docha in front of the other. You see the other Rabbah, the Makor of Kedusha is in Zman, and the same way that the Mishkan has the Kayach to be Mala, even the simple Behemoths, etc., etc. The obvious question. Why indeed is this so important that it's the non-asiyah of Malacha that creates Shabbos, and the entire Mishkan is only created within the context of no violation of Shabbos? Why would that be? So he basically explains based on his own that the meaning of the Malachis is from the word Malach. Malach, that's Malach. Malach Hashem. In other words, a Malacha is a translation of a Sheresh, just like a Malach is just a translator. Right? So it's a messenger that takes the Sheresh of a thing and brings it onto a level of reality where it's like a nerve, let's say a nerve message in a body. So it goes from the brain, moves a muscle, and so that would be a Malach, right? Or a deeper Malach would be messenger RNA. You have the Sheresh of the thing in terms of DNA. The messenger, which is the Malach, translates that into something that's capable of building proteins and makes it. But that concept of Malach is fundamental to everything that we know of in Bria. Things always are coded in a particular way from a Shoresh, and obviously a different Dargot refer to, in mystical ways, the Ishtalshalis of the Yom, but it's very simple things. Once a person gets a grasp of what's going on in the world, the entire world is this way. Everything is in terms of some translation in a hierarchy of things in which something on one level is a shirish and needs to be translated, and that thing becomes, it's a nested world.
There's an
The
agent.
an agent in which there's a, yeah, right, so forces, nerve, and whatever, on whatever diagram, you give it a different name. So that's why the funny malach in Yecheskel is essentially a robot with a measuring thing. I mean, that is, whatever it is, in the thing, it's whatever is appropriate for that sense of the agency that's required as a malach, right? This is the Indian, therefore, of Shabbos is always the shirish of the Kedusha. The point of the Mishkan is an attempt always to translate Kedusha. And therefore, it's when it says Ach et Shabtotai, it means the same thing as Ach et Hazahav. What is Ach et Hazahav? That you have to remove any tarnish before your mat feels something. So it really means leave the Shabbos to the actual shirish of the Indian, which means don't be calling Shabbos for the malach. That's just the malachas of a Mishkan. But Moshe Rabbeinu was going to reject the malach. And that's the whole point. And in rejecting the malach, he rejects the Mishkan, moves out of the machana, because the machana can't handle the expression of the Shekhinah that he can handle, and that's true even afterwards, which is why even the Ramban agrees that from Mitzvah Yom Kippurim, it didn't change until everything had to be reconstituted into a Mishkan. To reconstitute it into a Mishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu says, look, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, look, somebody's got to deal with the low-class people over here that need a Mishkan, you know. So you better get moving, and you don't get cracking, we're going to have to give it over to Yoshua. Because the darg of Yoshua is to accept the malach. So you don't accept the malach, so he has to accept the Mishnah. It's exactly the same malach the Mishnah didn't want to accept. That's why I say, Nein Ponech Holchim Al Ta'aleinu Mizeh, right? So Mamela, it comes out that this change over, in terms of the real Shirish HaInyan, is exactly what is happening here to Moshe, which is why we find the entire Parsha defines a Moshe who is totally ascendant over all of the other elements. So we say, if it's V'niflinu, it's V'niflinu Ani. But it's not V'niflinu Ani. What happened to Moshe, the Onav Mikol Adam? It's not enough to say V'nifla Amach. It has to be V'niflinu Ani. Absolutely, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, yes. That's the point. You have to be the one that's different. I want you to be different. And even at the end, it's the Psolacha al pi advar ma'il karati itcha brit vet Yisrael. Only because it was because of you. Neged kalamcha seniflaot kol amcha. Says the Ramban Re'ek v'ra'a kol am asher ata b'kirbo ki ha'gdulot v'ha'noraot ha'ela im Moshe yaseh otam u'ba'avuro ve'am yu b'brit. Fine. And he goes on, what are these niflaot? Inyan yirmoz or shkod hashkina behem, while heyotoin Moshe lechavod u'letifaret b'ne'elam u'b'mufla, which is beyond Hashrat Hashkina. The mufla is always back to Shrat. So we speak Baramis to the chavod u'letifaret. As Moshe Ish Elohim, it becomes the nature of Ish to Tiferet. And therefore, Kasher Amar v'niflinu, that's b'mufla, k'moshe pirashti, v'akadosh baruch hu yar'enu niflaot mitorat. So in other words, the whole point over here is indeed a transition to Moshe. So the that becomes Moed, the imcha, the ve'eschel goy gadol was the remez lechatchila to Moshe of the only possible response to this. We look at it as like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just, bluffing. No, emotional responsibility. So what sense does that make? Does it make any sense? I mean, if a kisei shel shlosha raglayim don't know, how is it good? No, but that was exactly what part of the hint was to Moshe. The hint is that there needs to be an aliyah in the nature of Yisrael, which you can handle, and they can't, which is why indeed Moshe goes here to become something new, to make a different kind of Olamoi. To time it that it has to be, it's his fame that's on the line. And that becomes the kind of Yisrael. And this is why, for the first time, we need to know all of the stuff of the Lechem Lo Achal. This is why Shevet Levi now is Mis'ala, Gufa through Moshe, This is why all of a sudden he gets Karneod. Why didn't he have Karneod before? Because this is the marker where the Karneod come. The Gam Yamino and Arsin and all of this is way beyond all of this. It's not a question of Yamino. And the Atapo Amori Madi is secondary to the whole thing. You see that just the beginning of that Darka. So when we begin, the Zeh Moshe Ha'ish has to be changed into something that's completely different. So that's the Atakach Lecha, the Niflino Ani Ve'amcha, Ki Me'bima Yivadeh Ki Batzatechem Be'enecha, Ani Ve'amecha. Vayi Kechaloto L'daber Moshe becomes now the Kechaloto. Here at the end of the parsha, when Moshe's Kechaloto L'daber Itam, unbelievable. The Ktav Lecha, the Psolat Yeshelcha, the Godol Kavod Acharon, the La'inei Kol Yisrael, and these Kardei are themselves. And then there's this amazing, amazing description of the Rabbeinu Bachya, of the meaning of the end of the parsha, and all of these Ramazim to Moshe, if you have the patience to listen. It's a long passage. What do you mean no search is found? There can't be no search is found for Rabbeinu Bachya. That's ridiculous. Unless I never copied it. Sure I did. It's Rabbeinu without a yud. That's Rabbanim Bachya. I mean, Rabbeinu Bachya is smarter than me. All right, so it brings like this. The Medrash. He brings first the Medrash on Amr Avinu Bar Shalom. Mikesh Moshe Rabbeinu Bar Shalom. Le'adaf HaMishnah B'chtav and so on. Then he goes on. Oh, a second, I need another Rabbeinu Bachya. I'm going to give me the Rabbeinu Bachya safer. Playing with this machine. Could be right. So he says, Dvarim Muflaim. He says. Here's this lashon. V'ra'u b'nei Yisrael et pnei Moshe. Ra'ui shetitorer b'kan lama izkira katuv Moshe shalosh pa'amim in that one pasuk. That's the last closing pasuk. 3 times in a row. V'hayev shalomar ki karan or panav ve'yeshivat ha'masveh. What is it mean? Karan or Moshe. Pnei Moshe. Yeshivat pnei Moshe. What for? All right. So, the Pshat of Shalfarish Gizek Neged Shalosh Pamim Arba'im Yom Shayam B'Mad, but because we know that there was a 3-pronged cycle of change. So maybe it's a remiss to that. And so it could be the Shalosh Krinot, we find Karan or Panav 3 times, and therefore we have Shalosh Pamim Panim. So he's obviously taking very seriously the transition of each one of these periods. It's not just 120 days. There's an aliyah of every time. Ki b'chol pam v'pam haya ole madriga shira'ui lehikare alea Moshe. Ki milat Moshe nigzar min hamayim mishitim. That means that he's drawing. This is connected the idea of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, which is the Makor Ruach HaKodesh, so that the remez in his actual name is that we repeat Moshe for each one of the aliyot, because he's drawing, he's continuing to draw more and more koach. So Mashaya b'yaldato mashrim min hamayim, hu remez l'mashativiyot b'ziknuto, mashrim min mimei chochma. Okay, fine, and that's all very nice. But he says it's much more than that. He says that in the end, al derech hakavana, he says the point of shalosh pamim Moshe, u'shalosh pamim panim, is connected 3, okay, and I won't go into the Kabbalistic elements of it, but it's because of Hukash Kvodo Lechvod HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'hu shamru Rabotenu, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe, Amar Takuma Hashem, Shuva Hashem. The same thing is true about you. Everyone is going to watch. And HaTorah Nikret Al Shmi, Torat Hashem Tamima, Nikret Al Shimcha, Zichru Torat Moshe. Yisrael Nikra Al Shmi, Lu Ami Shomea Li, Korui Al Shimcha, Moshe Amo. Dibarti Imcha Ba'amira V'dibur, V'yidaber Hashem Al Moshe, V'yomer Hashem Al Moshe, Af ata dibarti lefanai, V'yomer Moshe Al Hashem, V'yidaber Moshe Al Hashem, אני אין לפני אכילה ושתייה, לחם לא אכל, מים לא שתה. אני אלוהים, אותך נתתי אלוהים, נתתיך אלוהים לפרעה, לנביאים, לך נתתי נביא, אהרון אחיך יהיה נביאך. אני אין כל בריה יכולה להסתכל בי, שנאמר ולא כי לא יראני אדם וחי, אתה כן, ויראו מגשת אליו, וראית את אחוריי, והביטו אחרי משה. עד כאן במדרש. Says Rabbeinu Baruch, but this is just a small selection. You know, I mean, the Medrash could have gone on and on. Want me to give you some more examples? You know, I mean, it's nearly Marvet. It's just v'derech klal, v'derech tzara. You know, but there's much, much more. Pratim rabim. You know, hayagam efshar lomar. Ani yesh li misharet nikra nar, which is the Malach Matat that we're talking about over here. Ata yesh lecha misharet nikra nar. Mishato Yoshua benu nar. Let's make up his own Medrash now, right? Muhrach likara Yoshua nar. I mean, he's 56 years old. אני, יש לי 70 שרים של מעלה, שהצילות כוחם מכוחי. אתה יש לך 70 זקנים, ויצא מן הרוח אשר עליו היית 70 איש, etc. etc. כשהם 70 שרים של מעלה סביבות כיסאי, so too ביו, סביבות האוהל, and so on. ואחר שנסתכל איך גילה לנו המדרש הזה כבודו של משה, ואיך המשיל פניו לפנים של מעלה. My God. So מעתה הודיעך ואלפך חוכמה בטעם שהזכרה כתוב 3 פעמים פנים. And he goes into the whole union of the Midas. It's connected 3 different sections of the Midas and so on. This is connected Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's all called Koved and Ponim. Okay, this is a long discussion, and therefore the same way that we have Kishem Shekadova Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'atzmo, this idea of Shalosh Pamim, here too we have Shalosh Pamim, the idea of the Masveh, and Malat HaNavishim, Shilo HaKatuv LeBor'o, Mashalo Zacha Shum Yelid Isha L'Madrega Azot, and that's why it says Shalosh Pamim Masveh, and Ad Bo'o L'Daber Ito, Ayalo Lamar Ad Bo'o L'Daber Et Hashem, but no, it was Hashem who was Yered into the oral of Moshe, it's Ad Yered L'Daber Ito. So Adarabba, we didn't want to say it openly, so this is exactly what everybody was saying. Asher ben Enaish, and everybody's looking, Vishtachavu, and so on. What is the meaning of all this that we have to say this? And why do we have to say it there? Because that is the moment of the change. That's the point. It doesn't matter when it actually happened. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have told them to be Lech Alei, that Lech Alei means that you go down and you're going up. The psolacha, the psolat yushalcha is exactly the same thing. The psolat the luchot should be shalcha. The psolat of everything that went wrong here, the psolat of all Yisrael can be shalcha. As a matter of fact, the Erev Rav can be shalcha. Everything can be shalcha. Micha can be shalcha. I continue to be shalcha. Because as long as Moshe was there, originally it was only because of the power of his actual presence that he was there. But in reality, Moshe is the mechaber in which all of these things, and this is the lashon of Torah, Aaron Shibtzabek in the end, Torah is the lashon of hitparu, meaning they spread all over the place. That's the Rabban. Kitzona she'elem ro'eh, scattered to the 7 corners of the earth. That's the Parah, Rosh Hashanah. The hair just scatters around. Falls all over the place without having any seder. It was Moshe Rabbeinu who creates the place for each, and this is why the Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer says that he was Mesader Amokam for every one of the Shvatim, which is a ridiculous thing. What does it have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything. That's the point. It's amazing that they should throw that in with a throwaway line. I mean, this is a completely new understanding of the dialogue that Moshe Rabbeinu reached. So it comes out like this. We were talking before of the idea of Aaron HaKohen in the previous parsha being the vision of what it is possible to be. What's happening over here is that it's giving a completely different insight into the nature of what Adam is possibly able to be. And that's the union of the Luchos Hashnim that are created as the expression of the Luchos HaRishonim that contain the sherish of the Luchas Rishonim, because the Luchas Vashivei Luchas are still Munach Ba'ayim. They are. And there's two very important things to make this real that we need to understand. One is to recognize that it is not stam that we set it up in such a way that everybody sees and everybody bows down and that everybody has to say as if that's important. Ashrei, Ben Enai, Shlinas, Maktin, Lepitzchai, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's very nice. Why is that the portion of Pshat that Rashi has to bring in the Ra'u and Ishtachavu and so on? That it was after the translation into what can a human being be, right? Happy is a human being that reaches such a stage. And remember, this is the Rambam's entire approach to Moshe. Moshe represents the height of human achievement. Hamin ha'enoshi, mifchar hamin ha'enoshi. You want to know what you are as a human being? We said originally, you're talking about the human condition. The human condition is Moshe. The human condition is the breaking of the luchas and the yerida of human beings to be able to die, to be Moshe. And this is what a Ben Enaj is shaykh to. So that even though you don't see the luchas harishonim, those shivrei luchas remain attainable because of the shayrish of the Shina that exists in Moshe. Yeah. What is it that is happening to Moshe? What's happening to Moshe is the inversion of what was originally the Shivas Yomim that we said became the Shivas Yomei HaMilui. During those Shivas Yomim, a simple way of understanding it, that Moshe did not respond to the shlichus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he says there's a better guy to do this, and Lo Yish Dvarim Anochi, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, so look, if you can't do your job, so fine, we'll find somebody better. Ani amarti ata kohen hu levi achav, ata levi hu kohen. But the deeper reality of the story is that Moshe was right in rejecting the kahuna for himself, because he's not a kohen. The point of the kohen is that he has a job to do. Moshe Rabbeinu, what he says, and that's Rashi's lashon. The Kohen is a Lashon, Kol Lashon Kohen, Lashon Shirut. He has a job to do. Moshe Rabbeinu does not have a particular job. Moshe Rabbeinu's job is to be human. Because it's the only way that it's possible to be able to give a Torah, is that every human being who reads the Torah's Moshe understands that it's talking to him. And if Moshe Rabbeinu is not the ultimate human, what does it have to do with me? And that's the whole idea in which Moshe Rabbeinu is that Ma'ashem you can only say if you are so human that I can look at you and I say, I don't understand. Why do you think it's such a big deal? I mean, otherwise you think, what are you, crazy? But you have no understanding of what the difference, what I am and what you are. You could say to me something so idiotic. What do you mean, Ma'ashem? Give away everything. Give away my life. Everything. What do you mean? And it takes Pascal to make a wager like that, Who's going to do such a crazy thing? But if Lamaisa, it is possible for me to see in him, just the whole brilliance of Hashem, is the realness of things, the reality of it. There are no belief systems. There are no things. It's just what life is. That makes a tremendous difference. You look at the breakdown, even in the past dairies. The dairies that you yourself, if you were zerch to come into contact with someone, let's say 3 generations ago, 4 generations ago, the difference in those dairies is the difference between the elements of life being part of life or of being something outside of life that is imposed on life. Ideas, a religion, mitzvahs, belief systems. That's the difference. When something is just the way in which you live, you never hear about it. It's never talked about. It's just the way things really are. And if things really are that way, why would anybody need to talk about it? It's exactly the same question as to why everyone in Tanakh appears to have no relationship to being Jewish. Nobody does any mitzvahs. Nobody says Baruch Hashem. Nobody says Emir Hashem. Nobody says anything. I mean, the biggest thing is they're like a bunch of goyim over there, you know. What are they doing? Shooting people, making wars, building buildings. What happened to the Torah? I mean, but that's the whole point, is the Rahman al boy. It's either it's real or it's meaningless to me. What do I care? It's the ultimate mali v'la emunato. So you happen to believe this. What do I care? The idea of Moshe Rabbeinu is that he totally is what he is. So when he says Takadosh Baruch Hu lo ish dvarim anochi, he means that 100%. I cannot be the one who's motzi them mitzrayim, because if I do the whole job, it's only going to come across as a belief system. Right now, I am not. Devarim means that everything is misudar, as if it's fully understood, as if it's one simple way of saying everything. And if you don't see it that way, and your Devarim are separated, a piece here and a piece there, so it's kav lekav, zeir sham, tzav letzav. That's exactly the problem, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If that's what my Torah is tzav letzav and kav lekav, and it means nothing, because it's just not the way you're experiencing being. Therefore, give it to Aaron. Why give it to Aaron? Because Aaron is a great guy. That's why. You think that sounds funny? Why do we paskin halacha k'beit Hillel? Because he's a nice guy, says the Gemara. And he was always good enough to put Beit Shammai's words first, and he was very sweet when he talked to you. Well, what does that have to do with halacha? Understand? But you see that it paskins the reality of Torah. The lave of Aaron that we were speaking about until now, that lave of Aaron is the lave which over here becomes Botsea Berech Mietz Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who says Yikov Adin Sahar. Aaron is the one who's looking for compromises. What is that supposed to mean? Looking for compromises. He's always a good guy. So he'll always find something nice. That was his approach. I'll talk to this guy because I understand that if he only were given the advantages of good education, good parenting, whatever, he would be an amazing guy. Person says, my God, he really thinks that I'm capable of that. And so fine, he's Rabbi Meshiv Me'avam, he's a Makar of people, wonderful. What happens when Moshe isn't there? All of a sudden, the lave of Aaron not only is insufficient to hold people, it's insufficient to even attract any support. Vayar Aaron Vayivan, there's nobody coming to help me. He obviously said to himself that if I resist, still no one's going to come to help. So Vayar Shachut, still nobody's going to come to help me. Moshe Rabbeinu walks down, the entire resistance collapses like that. He waves his hands, they fall apart, tells everybody to go kill everybody, nobody stands up against them, 3,000 people dead, but nothing, what are you guys, crazy? Now, Aaron couldn't do that. With all of it, and so he's the one that's Botsea. He's trying to make a compromise. And this is fine up until now. All of a sudden, the whole thing falls apart, right? So why does it fall apart? So here is the Sheresh Einyan in the Kichalotol Daberito. The Kichalotol Daberito, again, whenever we mistake a word in the Torah that Chazal explained to us in a way that sounds like cute, we always end up missing the essential Nakudas. There's nothing cute. Always it's the Sheresh of the most profound insights into exactly what's going on. If Kichalotol Daberito is the transition to the entire story of the Egel, then obviously this is the Nakuda. If the parsha ends with the Kichalotol Daberitam, this is the idea. So here. So there's a story in the Zohar in the Zohar, the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, were very concerned with why, in fact, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to kick Moshe to remind him to Tahanichal, right? Why indeed, if this is always the anhag of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is the interrelationship of Midas Adin and Midas Harachamim with the Shechina and so on, what happened to mommy? Where was the Ima? I don't understand. What exactly happened to the Ima, they said. So they asked this.
Is Moshe on his own, is the question?
No, that Moshe didn't understand, says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He didn't understand because he wasn't a baki in the approach of the Ima. Fine. But what happened? What happened to the Ima is the question. What?
What other Ima?
The Ima is the Matranusa. The Ima is the Matranusa. I have to find it 1 second. Here. So first he talks about the general. I'll have to explain to you. First he talks about the general Hanhor. So the general Hanhor is saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look, you have no idea how much love there is for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. Some Rabbi Yossi, there's no such thing. There's no rachamim and av like HaKadosh Baruch Hu's av. Lo naval davar echad b'kol dvaro atov. V'afal gav da'agzim v'orin mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always exaggerates. I'm going to beat this stuff. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to, let's wipe them all out. We'll start all over again with Moshe. Right? But always, as I mentioned to you before, always atat ima v'itkafa b'dra yamina. So she attacks the yad, kam ritzua b'kiyume. So the ritzua never comes down because the ima prevents the ritzua from coming down. V'lo nochit l'tatas, there's no translation of that hanhag in the Eilam. V'lo yidavit, and therefore it doesn't happen because there's no malach that translates. Begin to the ita choda havedarvar. They're both in this together. It's a good cop bad cop relationship. It's one itza. Ihu da agzim. V'ihi de achidat v'yamine. The Baruch Baruch Hu is in magazine. It's like you're trying to scare the kids. V'i tema. Where does this come from? How do we know this? From this Maisa. It says leich reiki shichet abcha. So that means that Baruch Baruch Hu is shari on all Ritzua. He's picking up the Ritzua now, right? Moshe. The lo havayada orcha de ima shati. So Moshe's not smart enough to catch the cue. Whoops, now it's time to, because he's used to the fact that the normal anhaga is that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not do anything. So he realizes he missed the clue. So what he kicks him. No, hey. You missed your cue. Atahanichali. Miyad ergish Moshe. And Moshe grabs, the whole Gemara, grabs the Baruch Hu, v'ochi b'droy the kuchabrichu, and he says Zechor L'Avram, which is the Yad Yamin, that's exactly the beat of Chesed, who begin kach lo nochik ritzu. Fine. So now the question is, what happened? V'itema, so you're going to ask, what happened to Ima? Ima. Unhaget. Where did she go? So where was mommy? The Shavakat Mila Moshe, how was left over to Moshe? Right? So the Talmidim of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai say, She'ilna, we've asked this question, Ve'hamina, V'holo Yadana B'rir L'mila. We've asked around about this, we don't have a clear understanding. So Kadato L'kami the Rabbi Shimon. Here's amazing. It often happens in the Zohar that there's a brilliant expression through recreating the story in the discussion between the people that are there. So this is a tactic that everybody uses. In order to be meramis on the answers that are in the Parsha Gufa. So the Lashon of the Zohar picks the particular words of the sugya to translate them in such a way in the relationship in the story to the answer that ultimately emerges from the story. So it says the weirdest thing. Choma ban Payosiman. Vayar. He sees something. This is what he sees. Vayar. So it shouldn't Vayar. He sees something in their faces. So when he sees something in their faces, he says to them, Ulo b'nei kadishin, ulo rechimin de malka, ulo rechimin de li, ulo rechimin ilain b'ilain. And you think Chaloto is something. Chaloto is a person that loves the Divrei Torah. He starts talking about, listen, you guys, Mamish b'nei kadishim, the beloved of the Melech, my beloved ones, you guys who love each other, Elaine be Elaine. Then he goes off on a tangent, starting to explain why must you all be lovers? The Omer B'Hava, call Elaine Chavraya Delorachim and Elin Melin. If you're going to try to have a chabur of people where people don't love each other, they end up dying young. Because it's dangerous. Kol Chavraya B'Yud Rabbi Shimon, anyone that was a member of Rabbi Shimon's yeshiva during his entire life, Rechima de Nafshe v'Ruach Havi Beinayo. It was like an Avas Nefesh v'Ruach between every single one of them. And that's the reason began da. That is the reason why in the door of the Rabbi Shimon, B'Tgal Yahavi, everything was begolui. Everything was clear. He was able to say things that no one had understand before because the Ave Omer Rabbi Shimon, Kol Chavraya Delorachim and Elin Le'elin, Gam Yedolech Borach B'Sham. You're in a group of people that are not in love with each other. The results of your communication, of your talking, of your learning, is not going to be in a Derech Yashar. Something's going to be off. Fine. And of the Pegima, they destroy the Torah because the whole meaning of the Torah is only love and achva and kishot. It's only keneged emes and achva and love. And this is the ultimate kechalot. The berito, obviously, this is the vayar, so he's roya. And that's exactly, and it says it again, Kiva the Choma Siman Bampire, since he saw vayar, and since he told them this, so then he realized, okay, that means I can really talk to you guys, you know? So he says, Vaday Ruach Nevua Shorei Al B'Tzina Kadisha. Bocha Rabbi Shimon. He starts to cry, and he said, I'm going to tell you something. Chad Mila Mi'inun Mina de la Chashili Migaresh V'Tifta V'Gita Da'eden. I was in Gan Eden, and the Rosh Hashiva of Gan Eden whispered to me a number of secrets. And I was supposed to keep it secret. I can't resist such lovers. I can't resist. My beloved children. Why he goes starts again with this love? The loves of my soul. What am I supposed to do? I'm really Belakisha. It was told to me in secret, but I'm going to tell it straight on. Fine. But this is Be'etzem, his answer. The rest of the discussion, which talks about exactly the issues that we've spoken about the way that Moshe Rabbeinu is able to be described to the shirish of the idea that allows Shtina. And that's why it says, Vayamiru et kvodam. What is kvodam? Vayamiru et kvodam b'shor, Chala'isev, what is all of that? Kvod Yisrael is the Shtina. That's what it is. The Amirat Kvodam means the act of yours, the destruction of the possibility of Asher al Sashina, which is why he had to leave the Machana. Because the Machana was a place where people didn't love each other. That's the idea. The very story is the answer. The competition, the belief systems and competing systems and the shitas and so on, in which people didn't see a single yichud of all of the Torah with its various panim, which Moshe was zeichet to in the Vayachol. That is the reason there was no Ima. That was the whole point. And therefore Moshe was the only one who could restore that. So that means, here is the unbelievable point. We know that the lave that was Sameach, that's the whole idea of the lave of Aaron, the Nesiah of the Zikar of Bnei Yisrael al Liba. It's hard to try to get beyond that. So that his slave was not capable of maintaining zikaron. The meaning of zikaron is interrelationship. The word to remember means to remember, put things back, make it part of a member of a structure. So why is that zikaron not sufficient? And yet Moshe Rabbeinu is engaged in becoming the Ish Devarim, which Torah makes him. And that's at the end of the 40 years in the Midbar. He is the one who's the ultimate Ish Devarim, in which the Dvarim of Moshe become the Hefts of Torah. So that Elo Advarim Asher Diber Moshe is the fifth book of the Torah itself, so that he speaks the words of HaKadosh Baruch, which begins only here. Right? So how is it possible to go beyond that? Where is the beyond? And we all know, on a very simple level, the answer to that kind of thing. Because, and there's dargas to that answer. On the simplest level, we know there's lots of people that have a very loving attitude, but they are big compromisers. Botzei berech nietz Hashem. They are compromisers because their idea is not to create an actual marker for the interrelationship of all of the details such that the entirety can be saved, all of these strange differences. Their idea is tolerance, compromise. The problem with Aaron of the Botzei Berech is that it'll work out. I'll take the blame. They'll be okay. And it worked out exactly the opposite. It wasn't that way that he took the blame. Adarab, or Aaron the Shimsabakamayan. The only real ability for love to make a difference is where it is not connected simply with your experiences of what it means to be alive and your desire to interrelate with all things, which is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't have the ability to escape whatever it is that you are. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says, look, I'm not ready for this. The reason he's not ready for it is because I don't know myself. Listen to this wonderful lashon of the Ibn Ezra, which we made an underlying point. Vayiten al Moshe kechavoto ledaber ito. Reikei moach yitamhu. People have no brains, are always wondering. Like, what is there to do for someone up there? And to be up there 3 times, I'm going to and they don't understand. And here's this nakuda. Imlo yakir ma'aseh Hashem ve'yonimu b'shvili ve'edad rachav. As it says, so then there's nothing to discuss about. And therefore, close the door. Kol mi shelo yeda mahut nafsho chokhmat mal. If you don't know what you are about, what does all of that chokhmah mean? You have no understanding of your own existence. You're telling me that you have some relationship to something outside of you. So you don't think that 40 days is like an awfully short time to get to know yourself? That's amazing. In other words, he's made on the fact that ultimately, if the Torah is not biographical, it isn't Torah. It's chess. You're just studying nice chess games or European history or whatever. I mean, it becomes an emptiness of external structures that have nothing to do with the only thing that matters to us. And it's exactly the mirror image of what the entire world is Isaac. The entire world is Isaac only in those structures. It's the Nobel Prize that's won only for those structures. Anything that has to do with understanding oneself is pseudoscience and nonsense. Nobody knows anything about themselves. The knowing about oneself is only shaya through discovering that underlying makor, which is your makor in Torah. So that the love that he's talking about is not really shayach to the love of Aaron without Moshe. Obviously, there's no such thing as an Aaron without Moshe. I mean, that's the this is the part that's Megala, the deepest aspect of the Shnei Badei Aaron, which is Moshe and Aaron. And the way in which it's achieved is by stripping the two from each other. And now watch what happens. So you think we were talking about Aaron, that Moshe Rabbeinu was giving it over to Aaron? And watch what happens if Moshe goes away for an extra day. The whole thing falls to pieces. So that it's impossible to have anything but Potzei HaBerach. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about. I want to make Modi'in and everybody's in love with Karl and so on and so on. What comes from such things? Only Kilkulim. Nothing but Kilkulim. You look at every single sect, anywhere in the world, that has started with this love jazz, they become Christians, they become abusers, they become Meshuggahim, become weirdos, whatever it is. I mean, that has nothing to do with anything that is part of the discovery of yourself. So the moment that you're focused on someone else, something is wrong. By definition, the focus on another is infatuation. How do you say infatuation in Hebrew? No. Huh? What's it called? No, infatuation is let's see how they say infatuation. I don't know whether there's a hold on. It's a wonderful word. Choli ha'ava. It's not the, yeah. Right. It's called Choli ha'ava in the Rishonim, but I don't think in modern Hebrew.
כן, זה מודרן היברו.
כן, אומרים חולת אהבה?
אהבה עיוורת. התאהבות טיפשית.
That's what Morphic says? Okay, but that's not, it's much deeper than that. What?
אהבה עיוורת.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't quite capture the idea, but cholat ahava does capture the idea. Cholat ahava means that the person is taken out of himself and out of normal functionality because he's completely taken by something outside of himself.
זה לא טוב.
זה לא טוב. So the only thing that makes that difference, of course, is there one place where the Rambam says that cholat ahava is the only solution, and that's the oseta emet b'fnei shu emet. But that's in terms of eino ohevet hakadosh baruch hu eleh b'fi hadeyah asher yodeo, as the Rambam concludes in Hilchos Shuvah, taking us back to Hilchot Yisodei Torah, so that it's Moshe Rabbeinu's quest for something that is beyond Aaron. The idea of becoming and saying, I can't be Aaron, I need to be the Ish Dvarim. There are people who are in fact driven to utilize the lave that they have to integrate the world and to bring Teva to the world and to bring Shalom to the world. And that is the Darga of Aaron HaKohen, the Darga of Hillel HaZaken, and so on and so forth. But it's only the aspect of themselves that is discovered because of their experience of what it means to be themselves. This is what I know I am. And in that knowledge is the knowledge of the Yichud Hashem. In that knowledge is the knowledge of the Yichud of the Eilam. In that knowledge is the kinship to things. I don't need to create it. I don't need to run out and make it happen. All I need to do is to make the other understand it so that it's possible for them to actively participate. But that's the idea. That's exactly what Reb Shimon is doing here. I know that underneath this all, it's kechaloto. How do I know? Because I looked at you and I saw. Because anybody can look and see. You can see if someone is shy to love. So if it's kechaloto, then I will speak to you. That's exactly what he says. The same thing that the Medrash is about that moment. Kechaloto medaber. That's what he says. I saw this in you. Now that I see this in you, then I can speak to you. But that means that the sheresh of Shekhinah here is dependent on the rebuilding of that pirud. The rebuilding of that pirud First of all, it's Muhumas in the Keteret up front at the beginning of the parsha, because that's the Cheldana. If you have Kol Asifa of Tefillah, Tainus, that doesn't have Miposhe Yisrael, it's the Tefillah is not mitkabelet, right? Because the same thing as Cheldana. You can't create the Keteret unless you have something that stinks in it. So where's the Posheya? Because it's not the tzura of the Am without the Posheya. There's no recognition of the interrelationship and the breadth without the Posheya. The shekel, the machatzit shekel at the beginning, it's also, as the Orach Chaim says, his famous pshat, the machatzit shekel. His wife, but it was such a strange Yerushalmi that Rabbi Meir says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was neitolish, a koy of a machatzit shekel mitachat kisei hakavod, and that becomes the zeh. It's this matbea shel eish elo, and a matbea shel eish had a weight of machatzit shekel. Of discussion among Rishonim and what's the stand. Why don't you just identify how many horns of silver you need, and what does that mean? How is there a matbea that's kodesh? What is a shekel of kodesh? What is a shekel that is tachat kisei kavod? Now all of this relates to, as the Orach Chaim points out, is that it's the idea that something that integrates Yisrael is the Kisei HaKavod. That's exactly what he was saying. It's the Emirat Kvodam B'Tavnit Shor. So the fact that you find it beneath, so I just have the right Orach Chaim. No, that's the other Orach Chaim. No, that's one. This Orach Chaim. So Lokach Kavid Matbea Shalesh Mitachat Kisei HaKavod, and this is exactly, and V'chot Hayalo Lomar Shekel Shalem. What is this Machatzit HaShekel specifically? It takes Mitachat Kisei HaKavod, and that's what he said. That B'chinat Kisei Kavodo Yidvarach is Ma'aseh Klal Yisrael. That's Shechinato, and Ma'aseh B'nei Yisrael Yisovevu Hafradatam. So if you do Pirut, exactly like the Zohar says over here, you end up without the Kisei HaKavod. V'hu omro u'b'pish'echem shulcha imchem. You want to know where Ima disappeared to? B'pish'echem shulcha imchem. And that's exactly the thing. Nargan mafrid aluf. V'yedei ma'aseh egel tzovavu hafrada in shorshei b'chinat kodesh v'od Yisrael. That's what we've been talking about. It's amazing. Like, take this for granted. V'lazeh tziva Hashem she'yitu machatzit shekel. That everything is mufrad, to have it come together, at least to be able to achieve things together, to the hakarat hadavar, to be matbea shel eish mitachat kisei hakavod kishon b'chinat shel shenishmot b'nei Yisrael. Kazeh yitnu yachzor latet the machatzit she'ifrid. Okay, fine, remez and metaphors and so on, but the idea is clear that even the opening of the parsha becomes a transition to the nature of pesha into Hafradah, into Aaron HaKohen's need to be Matayar Yadav V'Raklav himself, which until now we thought he was the Makar of Kedusha. And instead, it turns out that all of the hints that are given over to Moshe and his understanding, and this is why when the Mechenina Misifracha is the response to the idea of Eschela Goy, which we take to mean everybody's basically, posturing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't really mean Eschela Goy. He doesn't really mean Mechenina Misifracha. The idea,
The fanim, everything is the fanim.
Yeah, I mean that's how we take it. But the truth is, if it's really trying to point out to Moshe that it has to be done through your achievement, which is the truth in the end. And if it's the truth, then that's the truth. That's exactly what the rest of the parsha about. And if Moshe Rabbeinu's response is as the Medrash, the Zohar brings this also, that the Mechenina is Keneged Meinoach, right? Because that's why he says, where's all of that? So the Zohar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu never said Matzatachein Beinai. Yes, he did. V'noach Matzachein. So this was the B'shigamu Basar. The B'shigamu Basar B'shaz Nayach is V'yu Yamad Mea V'esrim Shana is Moshe. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, so we take it as it's so cute. It's cute again. Moshe Rabbeinu says, well, now the first time that I didn't fight when you said, I'm going to wipe out the whole world, so then everybody's blaming me for it. Ki mei noach zosli. So I'm going to take those letters, mei noach, and turn it into Bechenina. That's the same letters, right? Very cute. But if indeed this is a search of Moshe Rabbeinu for his own Shorashim, and what it is that he has represented in his, even as Rashi says, Moshe ben HaTorah b'nai lifnei Shemela, where the Mekeres in the Torah for Moshe. What is Moshe? What things, Keiches of the Torah does it take? This is the B'Shigamu Basar. If it's an honest attempt for the first time to trace his own Lo Ish Dvarim Anochi, where do I come from to be able to discover what are my Dvarim? So then it makes perfectly good sense that this is the time. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, listen, this is about you. Either you're going to discover yourself, and then indeed you become the Kohen in the sense that you're the one that allows the Kohen to be. And now we understand that the Shivas Yovel is on the fight. Let's give it to somebody else. But I'm making that somebody else possible, not just because of the Shivas made me William, but because of the Chibur Bichlal between Torah and Aveda and Av and connection to the universe, and what it is to provide Zikaron. It's one thing to have Zikaron delayed, but it's another thing to have the Mikar for those Zikaronis in your mind, such that there's no contradictions between the life that you lead, the things that you understand, the people that you relate to, the meisim that you do. The integration of such thing is totally beyond Aaron. And that's exactly what it's saying. Aaron can be part of a Mishkan, but the Mishkan can't be Derech Shabbos. Moshe Rabbeinu's darga is Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. His chilek is this Shabbos that it's spoken about here. That Matana. And that, it's mamish like the Moreh Nevuchim that takes him all the way back to Hodieni Nadrachecha, which clearly in the Parsha has to take you back to Shabbos, because that's where it all started. It turns out the integration of the issues is much more profound. It looks like it. There's so much separate things. And now, if you look at it this way, it becomes a new vision of humanity. And the new vision of humanity is a very clear-cut sense of where you yourself have to be. Because people lead lives of pirud, deep levels of pirud. They can have all of these wonderful midas. Many people, wonderful, wonderful midas. They're unable to be mechaber that midah to an understanding of themselves. It's the way that I am. And there's other people with tremendous amount of insight and in Torah and even an integrative insight in Torah. But are unable to have the experiential reality of the Kechalotol Daber, and therefore remains forever, as Rabbi Shimon says, it goes off to Urach, that is no good. Why should that be? I think it was Rabbi Barnea said before. That's the key of all people. That's exactly the point. It was the original point of Navol Tibol. If something is missing in the way that Moshe interrelates with Yisrael, it's going to end up being Navol Tibol. You're going to go off the derech, and that's exactly what happens. And that's what exactly Reb Shimon is pointing out here as well. So the things that we tend to denigrate as being merely romantic and having no place in the actual Avodas Hashem and the actual learning turn out to be the central problem. When you walk into a Beis HaMedrash and you don't sense love, that's not where you can be. You can't learn there. That's what he's saying. You can't learn there. You will be destroyed by the experience. And what has happened is this coldness that has been here, and the sense of, okay, we'll learn this halach, we'll learn that halach, we'll become this dayan and this dayan, and we'll get that smicha. It's totally irrelevant. It's worse than irrelevant, because it's left without the connectedness, which is the etzem chefetz of Torah. That's what the Ibn Ezra is saying. If you don't know anything about yourself, and you don't have the experience of actually living in a world of kechaloto, so what do you think you're doing? Chochmat malo. Why is this chochmah valuable to you? It's just external. It becomes binasaf alachutz, and it becomes very destructive. If anything touches on the underlying issues that affect all institutions, it's this nekuda. The loss of the entire relationship idea, which yeshiva was always based on. Now it makes an idea. A yeshiva runs itself. It has a figurehead. There's no real sense of this darga of connectedness. And so, I spend a year here, I spend a year there. I go around. I got to learn by Reb so and so, and then I got to go Reb so-and-so, and sometimes he doesn't even get a Reb. Sometimes just his first name, or his nickname, God help us.
Closed this week, right, because the Yeshiva lost control of the Talmidim. It was no longer connected.
Okay, I don't know, I'm not in the Lashon Hara network, but, the Devil's Radio, you gotta be part of the Devil's Radio to know all of it. But the point is, there's something that is borrowed to everybody, but the losses of the intangibles and the things that people think are just additions and useful additions are not useful additions. They represent the difference between a breakdown that ultimately leads to ego and a recreation of a possibility of not only Shekhinah b'Yisrael, but the internalization of Shekhinah that allows a person to live a life that, as the Rambam says, Moshe Rabbeinu lived. A life in which it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're being the makolet, you're talking to your wife, you're taking a shower, it makes absolutely no difference. The chibur and the reality of the experience of the love of being, which provides you the connectedness to everything that's around you, is so profound that it creates a base of awareness which Moshe Rabbeinu is representative of that. That's how he defines Moshe Rabbeinu. And he says that's the ultimate goal of what it is to be a human being. That's what he was there to. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ya'ireinenu, we should be zerich as much as possible to be chalot tov beverito. And halavai to meet again next week and to discover more.
That's the beginning of Torah's Moshe.
Yes, that's right.
Also,
Very good.
the panim el panim.
Sifrecha. Is that it becomes B'tchila with Teras Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's B'teras Hashem Chatzol, and then it's B'teras Yega Yom HaMalayim. So it says B'cheina Misifrecha. I don't like that years of the Sefer Torah.
And the panim el panim is the panim el achiv. That
Isha
Isha achiv, that becomes, which is the learning of the, which is also Talmud Torah.
Nine.
Fine. Stam me leave. Yeah, we can write it over.